Hello Midnights. Up next, Screams and Shadows, Blackwood Manor's true terror unleashed on investigators. Let us know where you are listening from and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for tuning in. The wind, a mournful whisper through the skeletal branches of the old oak, seemed to carry a warning. Jake Thorne shivered, though not from the unseasonable June chill that permeated Blackwood Manor, just outside Burlington, Iowa. It was a cold that gnawed at the soul, a prelude to the terror he knew awaited them. Blackwood, a notorious landmark in paranormal circles, stood silhouetted against the bruised twilight sky, its jagged gables like grasping claws reaching for a forgotten past. Locals whispered tales of its dark history, of the family that vanished without a trace, and the lingering presence that claimed anyone foolish enough to trespass after dusk, their stories growing more chilling with each telling, each unexplained disappearance adding another layer to the manor's grim legend. A palpable sense of dread clung to the air around the property, a silent scream frozen in time, a pervasive whisper of madness that promised to unravel even the strongest minds. "Ready, team?" Jake's voice, usually resonant with unwavering confidence, cracked slightly, a telltale sign of the profound dread that coiled in his gut. His gaze swept over his team, each member a carefully chosen piece of this dangerous puzzle, each one now potentially a sacrifice. Beside Jake stood Dr. Aris Thorne, his younger, more pragmatic sister and the team's lead parapsychologist. With her sharp mind and an unwavering commitment to scientific rigor, Aris approached every haunting with a healthy dose of skepticism, always seeking empirical data to validate or debunk paranormal claims. Her analytical nature was her armor, a shield against the irrational, but tonight, even her usually impassive expression seemed taut with anticipation, a faint furrow appearing between her brows as she adjusted her military-grade night vision goggles. She was a woman of logic and reason, but Blackwood Manor had a reputation, a weight of despair so suffocating it almost tasted metallic on the tongue, that even her scientific mind couldn't entirely dismiss. There was a flicker of something in her eyes Jake recognized, not outright fear, but a profound unease that edged close to it, a subtle shift in her usual composure, betraying the cracks forming in her logical fortress. And leading them into this abyss was Jake Thorne himself. A seasoned paranormal investigator with a reputation for tackling the most malevolent cases, Jake possessed an uncanny intuition that often guided them where instruments failed, a sixth sense honed by years of brushes with the unknown. He carried the weight of past encounters, his eyes holding a depth that spoke of battles fought and horrors witnessed, each scar on his soul a testament to the darkness he confronted. He was the anchor of the team, his courage often bordering on recklessness, driven by a desperate desire to understand and, if possible, neutralize the insidious darkness that preyed on the living, often at a heavy personal cost. Tonight, however, the very air around him felt charged, as if the manor itself knew he was coming, anticipating his presence with a predatory patience. He felt a phantom chill trace his spine, a sense of being observed long before they even set foot inside, a chilling familiarity with the encroaching malevolence that tightened its grip on his very breath. Behind them, Ben Carter, the team's tech guru, fiddled with a sophisticated array of EMF meters, thermal cameras, and a custom-built geophone designed to detect subtle ground vibrations. Young, brilliant, and perpetually wired on caffeine, Ben was the technological backbone of their operations. He could rig a surveillance system in minutes or devise a new sensor on the fly, his youthful eagerness a stark contrast to the grim resolve etched on the Thorne siblings' faces. He approached the supernatural with a mixture of scientific curiosity and boyish fascination, sometimes underestimating the true danger that lurked beyond the circuit boards and data streams. He always packed extra batteries, a nervous habit that spoke volumes, but tonight, even his usual chatter had subsided into a low, anxious hum, replaced by quick, furtive glances at the dark, looming manor. His hand visibly trembled as he checked his equipment one last time. Completing their quartet was Sarah Jenkins, the team's sensitive, blessed, or perhaps cursed, with the ability to perceive echoes of the past and the lingering energies of the dead. Sarah was their most invaluable, yet vulnerable, asset. Her eyes, even in the fading light, seemed to pierce the veil between worlds, often reflecting the suffering she encountered, a mirror to the agony of forgotten souls. She clutched a worn silver crucifix, its aged silver gleaming faintly against her pale skin, a talisman against the unseen forces that preyed on her heightened senses. A low hum vibrated in her ears, a premonition she couldn't quite decipher, but one that left her with a growing sense of dread, a chilling certainty that something truly ancient and hungry stirred within those walls. Her skin prickled, a warning she couldn't ignore, a growing tightness in her chest that made every breath a struggle. "As ready as we'll ever be for a place that's swallowed 3 teams before us, Jake," Aris replied, her tone clipped, her fingers unconsciously tightening on her own equipment bag. Let's stick to the protocol. No heroics, no splitting up. Not tonight. Not in this place. The unspoken words hung in the air like a pall. Tonight feels different. Tonight, we might not make it out. This could be our last stand. A shiver ran down Aris's spine, despite her best efforts to remain purely analytical, a cold tendril of fear finding its way past her logical defenses. The heavy oak doors, studded with rusted iron and carved with forgotten symbols, groaned open with a sound that echoed through the silent woods, a drawn-out lament that seemed to whisper welcome home in a chillingly possessive way. They revealed an entryway swallowed by impenetrable shadows, a void that seemed to suck in the last vestiges of twilight, leaving only deeper, colder darkness. Dust motes, disturbed by their intrusion, danced like phantom fireflies in the lone beam of Jake's powerful LED flashlight, each particle seemingly holding a memory of despair, of suffering. The air inside was thick, heavy, laden with the cloying scent of decay, damp earth, and something else, something ancient, metallic, like old blood and rust, and undeniably malevolent. The temperature immediately dropped several degrees, causing goosebumps to prickle their skin, a cold that felt less like temperature and more like a pervasive chill seeping into their very bones, a cold that promised to never leave, to take root, to consume them from the inside out. A faint, almost imperceptible whisper brushed past Jake's ear, a wordless promise of torment, of madness, of being consumed, its breath icy against his skin, a voice that seemed to speak directly into his mind. Their first few hours were standard procedure, meticulously documented with Ben's body-mounted cameras, every flicker of light and whisper of sound recorded. EMF meters, Ben's specialized Ghost Tracker 5000 and Aris's more conventional handheld model, flickered erratically, spiking wildly in random corners of the sprawling manor, their erratic readings mirroring the team's rising apprehension. The needles jumped and danced as if unseen hands were toying with the energy fields around them, building to a crescendo of frantic energy. The thermal camera registered phantom cold spots, pockets of air several degrees below ambient temperature that moved with an unnatural, deliberate sentience, like unseen entities gliding through the rooms, their forms just beyond the visible spectrum, mere inches from their unsuspecting faces, their cold breath brushing past. Sarah, her breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps, her body beginning to tremble almost imperceptibly, reported fleeting visions, a woman weeping uncontrollably in the opulent, yet crumbling, ballroom, her silent sobs chilling Sarah to the core, threatening to overwhelm her, to draw her into the agony of a forgotten past, a child's mournful wail from the silent, dust-shrouded nursery, its crib still standing eerily intact, holding nothing but despair, a lullaby of sorrow that echoed in Sarah's own soul, pressing against her sanity. Each report was met with a chilling confirmation of fluctuating atmospheric pressure and an almost imperceptible shift in the ambient humidity, making the very air feel heavy and suffocating, pressing in on them, stealing their breath, making every inhale a struggle. But it was the library that truly set them on edge, its towering shelves casting long, predatory shadows that seemed to writhe with their own dark life. As Ben meticulously set up a static camera to monitor a section of shelves, a heavy, leather-bound tome, seemingly untouched for decades, slid with agonizing slowness from a high shelf and then plummeted with a bone-jarring thud at Aris's feet. The pages, yellowed and brittle with age, were blank, a mocking emptiness, a chilling taunt, hinting at knowledge erased or never meant to be read, a narrative unfinished. A collective gasp escaped them, a nervous tremor rippling through the team. Jake felt a sudden, inexplicable surge of rage, a searing, irrational urge to smash something, to lash out at the unseen presence, to break something, anything, to alleviate the psychological pressure that was building inside him. He fought it down, recognizing it as an external influence, a raw, primal mental assault from whatever lurked in the shadows, trying to provoke a reaction, to erode their control, to sow discord within the team, to turn them against each other. His knuckles were white on his flashlight, the plastic creaking under the strain of his grip. Then came the whispers. At first, faint, indistinct murmurs that seemed to follow them from room to room, like a ghostly echo of conversations long past, just beyond the edge of audibility, always receding when they tried to pinpoint the source. They were like secrets being hissed, promises of dark delights and forgotten suffering, insidious and seductive, subtly twisting their perception. Ben's sophisticated audio recorder, equipped with parabolic microphones, picked up snippets, distorted and chilling. "You'll never leave, it's yours now, forever, part of the house, one of us, join us, die with us." The words seemed to intertwine with the sounds of scratching coming from behind the crumbling plaster walls, a rhythmic, insidious scraping that intensified, as if something was trying to claw its way out, desperate for freedom or to drag them in, and the distant, rhythmic creak of floorboards in empty rooms above them, as if an unseen weight was slowly, deliberately pacing, waiting, watching their every move, enjoying their terror. The sense of being watched, of being hunted, intensified with every passing moment, pressing in on them from all sides, a palpable, suffocating presence that was closing in. Jake felt the hairs on his arms stand on end, a primal instinct screaming at him to flee, to abandon this fool's errand, to save himself, but he couldn't leave his team. "This is more active than anything we've ever encountered," Ben stammered, his usual composure dissolving, his fingers fumbling nervously with the sensitive dials on his spectrum analyzer, his eyes darting nervously into the encroaching darkness, fear finally eclipsing his scientific curiosity. "The energy spikes. They're off the charts. It's almost sentient. It knows we're here. It's playing with us. It's toying with us." His voice was barely a choked whisper now. "It's feeding," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible, choked with terror, her eyes wide with a terrifying knowing that chilled Jake to the bone, a deep, ancient fear reflecting in their depths. Her hand trembled as she instinctively reached for Jake's sleeve, her grip desperate, almost crushing, a plea for protection. "It wants us to stay. It wants to break us, to make us part of this place. It's drawing us in, pulling at our minds. It's hungry for our despair. It's trying to consume us, one by one." A chill that had nothing to do with the temperature permeated the room, a dread that clawed at their very souls, a cold that felt like the touch of death itself, stealing their warmth and their hope, chilling them to the core. The air grew heavy, almost viscous, making it hard to draw a full breath, as if the oxygen itself was being consumed by the entity, leaving them to gasp for nothing. The true horror began in the early hours of the morning, just as the moon began its slow descent, casting long, grotesque shadows through the broken windows, shadows that seemed to writhe with their own malevolent life, reaching for them, beckoning them into the abyss. They were in the master bedroom, a room notorious for its grim history of inexplicable disappearances and alleged suicides, a room where the very air felt thick with despair, a tangible weight on their chests, a silence that hummed with unseen torment. Aris was meticulously documenting a sudden, localized drop in temperature to nearly freezing point near a rotting four-poster bed, the data scrolling wildly across her tablet, meaningless in the face of what came next, when a bone-chilling scream ripped through the oppressive silence, tearing through the very fabric of the manor, echoing into their minds. It wasn't human. It was a sound of pure agony and despair, something ancient and primordial, a sound that clawed at their very sanity, causing involuntary tremors through their bodies, seizing their hearts in a vice-like grip, threatening to shatter their eardrums and their minds, to drive them to the brink of madness. Suddenly, the air grew heavy, thick with a palpable dread, a suffocating weight that pressed down on them, squeezing the air from their lungs, making their vision swim, making their thoughts cloudy. The single powerful work light Ben had set up flickered violently, then died with a final, desperate spark, plunging them into absolute, suffocating darkness. The silence that followed was even worse than the scream, punctuated only by their own ragged breathing and the frantic pounding of their hearts, each beat a drum of impending doom, counting down to their end. Ben's terrified shout, raw with primal fear, pierced the blackness, utterly devoid of his usual bravado. "My camera. It's gone. The one on the tripod. It just vanished. It was right here, I swear. It took it." His voice was a ragged sob, trembling uncontrollably. Jake fumbled for his military-grade tactical flashlight, its powerful beam cutting through the oppressive gloom, momentarily revealing a chaotic scene of shifting shadows, twisting into monstrous forms that seemed to watch them, to leer, to close in. Ben was crouched in a corner, trembling uncontrollably, his usually pristine equipment scattered around him like toys, or perhaps, an offering to an unseen force that had swept through with a terrifying, destructive will. A cold, unseen hand, with fingers that felt like ice-cold talons, seemed to brush against Jake's cheek, leaving a burning sensation that lingered even after he flinched violently, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird trying to escape its cage. The acrid scent of ozone filled the air, mingling with the sickening sweetness of decay and something else, something metallic and sharp, like the taste of fresh fear and blood, a visceral warning of violence to come. "Stay together. Back to back. Don't move. Maintain formation," Jake roared, his voice hoarse, attempting to project an authority he didn't entirely feel, trying to quell the rising panic, as much for himself as for his team, trying to cling to the shreds of their tactical training, to any semblance of control. He could hear Sarah whimpering softly, her prayer now a frantic, unintelligible murmur, close to breaking, on the precipice of a mental collapse. But it was too late. A chilling wail, more guttural and ancient than anything they had yet heard, emanated from directly behind Sarah, a sound that seemed to vibrate in her very bones, a sound that promised unimaginable torment, a living scream torn from the fabric of pure evil. She let out a blood-curdling shriek as an unseen, powerful force flung her against the far wall with sickening force, the sound of her impact echoing in the small room, followed by a grunt of pain and the telltale crack of splintering wood, a bone-deep impact that resonated in the air. The worn silver crucifix flew from her grasp, landing with a loud clatter on the dusty floorboards, its protective aura seemingly shattered, its light extinguished, a cold comfort now useless against the overwhelming malevolence that surged through the room. "Sarah! No! Hold on! I've got you," Aris cried, her scientific detachment completely shattered, replaced by raw, desperate concern, rushing towards her sister, abandoning her post, her own fear momentarily forgotten in the face of Sarah's immediate peril, her only focus to reach her, to pull her from the brink. As Aris reached Sarah, helping her to a sitting position, the floor beneath them began to vibrate violently, a deep, resonant rumble that shook the very foundations of the manor, sending dust and crumbling plaster raining down on them. Cracks spiderwebbed across the ornate plaster ceiling with an ominous creak, widening with each passing second, threatening to bring the entire room down, to bury them in this tomb of despair. Dust rained down in thick clouds, stinging their eyes, making it difficult to breathe, to see, obscuring the terror, making it feel even more insidious. A guttural growl, impossibly deep and resonant, filled the room, a sound that seemed to tear at the very fabric of reality itself, causing the hairs on Jake's neck to stand on end, a primal fear he hadn't known he possessed, a raw, instinctual dread that screamed at him to run. A dark, swirling mist, dense and pulsating with a sickly green luminescence, began to coalesce in the center of the room, growing larger, more defined, drawing in the surrounding shadows as if hungry for them, for their very essence, for their lives. It pulsed with a malevolent, hungry energy, its form vaguely humanoid, yet impossibly distorted, writhing like a diseased serpent, tendrils of darkness reaching out, like grasping claws, towards them, seeking to ensnare, to drag them into its dark embrace. Jake felt a desperate surge of adrenaline, cold dread mingling with a fierce determination. This wasn't just a haunting, it was a demonic entity, something far beyond their usual scope of residual energy and intelligent spirits. It was an intelligence, an evil with a purpose, a hunger that transcended mortal understanding, a pure, unadulterated malevolence that delighted in suffering. He knew, with a sickening certainty, that they were no longer simply investigating, they were fighting for their lives, for their very souls, against something that reveled in their terror, that fed on their fear, growing stronger with every panicked breath they took, with every ounce of hope that drained from them. It was trying to break him, to make him succumb, to join the tormented chorus of Blackwood, to make him one of its puppets, to turn him into another forgotten scream echoing in these halls. He thought of the three teams that had vanished here, their fates now chillingly clear, a cold premonition of their own demise, their screams perhaps echoing in this very room, adding to the symphony of despair. "We need to get out. Now. Before it's too late. It's too strong. It's trying to get into our heads. Fight it," Jake yelled, his voice strained, pulling out a consecrated iron stake he kept for emergencies, a last resort against truly malevolent forces, a desperate prayer in metal, a futile hope against impossible odds. The iron felt strangely hot in his hand, almost burning, as if rejecting the purity of his intent, its edges seeming to hum with a faint, almost imperceptible energy, a last flicker of hope against the overwhelming darkness. But the entity moved with terrifying speed, faster than anything corporeal, a blur of malevolent mist, a shadow given form, a nightmare made flesh. It lashed out, a tendril of dark, grasping mist wrapping around Ben's ankle with a sickening snap, a sound that made Jake's stomach churn, a visceral sound of bone on bone, impossible to unhear. He screamed, a sound of pure agony and terror, as he was violently yanked off his feet and dragged across the splintered floorboards towards the swirling, abyssal vortex, his frantic struggles futile, his terrified pleas dissolving into garbled cries, his body twisted impossibly, unnaturally, as the tendril tightened its grip. "Ben! Hold on! Don't let go! Fight it!" Aris shrieked, scrambling desperately to help him, her fingers scrabbling to find purchase on his flailing arm, pulling with all her strength, her muscles straining, her teeth gritted, a silent vow to not let him go, even as her own strength waned, as despair began to creep into her mind, threatening to consume her own will. But the mist was too strong, too pervasive, pulling Ben closer, closer to its swirling, abyssal core, threatening to consume him entirely, to erase him from existence, to make him another missing soul of Blackwood, adding his anguish to its unending feast, his fading cries already joining the chorus of the damned. Jake lunged forward, the iron stake held aloft, its tip glinting faintly in the sporadic, re-emerging light from their headlamps, a desperate beacon in the encroaching darkness. But the entity, with an unnerving, predatory sentience, turned its full, malevolent attention to him. A wave of immense, suffocating pressure slammed into him, knocking the wind from his lungs, forcing him to his knees, his vision blurring, his head swimming with disjointed screams and fragmented visions of utter despair. He felt a searing pain, as if he were being burned from the inside out, his skin crawling, his blood feeling like ice, his mind assaulted with fragmented images of suffering and despair. Visions, fragmented and horrifying, flashed through his mind, the manor's original inhabitants, driven to unspeakable acts of madness and despair, their violent, agonizing deaths echoing through the centuries, their screams now Jake's own, a symphony of torment that threatened to shatter his sanity, to tear his very being apart. The entity was feeding on their fear, their despair, their very life force, growing stronger with every panicked breath they took, with every ounce of hope that drained from them. It was trying to break him, to make him succumb, to join the tormented chorus of Blackwood, to make him one of its puppets, a permanent resident of its horrifying domain. Sarah, her eyes wide with unholy terror, her body racked with shivers, suddenly began to recite a prayer, her voice trembling but gaining strength with each syllable, a raw, desperate incantation against the encroaching darkness. It was an ancient Latin exorcism, whispered by her grandmother, a prayer she barely remembered, but clung to like a lifeline, her only defense against utter madness, a fragile shield against the encroaching evil. The entity recoiled slightly, the pulsating mist flickering, a faint whine emanating from its core, like a tormented beast, momentarily thrown off balance by the purity of her defiance, by a force it could not corrupt, could not understand, a primal pain in its ethereal form. "Keep going, Sarah. Don't stop. Fight it. Now," Jake gasped, pushing himself up through sheer force of will, defying the pain, defying the malevolence that sought to consume him. The consecrated iron stake now felt impossibly heavy, a burden of life and death, the last weapon against utter oblivion, its heat a painful reminder of its power, a beacon in the encroaching cold, its presence a defiant roar. With a desperate, animalistic roar, he threw every ounce of his remaining strength and resolve into his next move, a desperate gamble with his very soul. Aris, her face grim with a fierce determination, had managed to grab Ben's arm, pulling with all her might against the entity's relentless grip, her muscles straining, her teeth gritted, a silent vow to not let him go, even as her own strength waned, as despair began to creep into her mind, threatening to consume her own will. But the mist was too strong, too pervasive, pulling Ben closer, closer to its swirling, abyssal core, threatening to consume him entirely, to erase him from existence, to make him another missing soul of Blackwood, adding his anguish to its unending feast, his fading cries already joining the chorus of the damned. Just as Ben's fingers slipped from Aris's grasp, just as his eyes began to roll back in his head, his body arching in an unnatural way, Jake, with a final, guttural scream of effort that tore at his throat, plunged the consecrated iron stake into the very heart of the swirling darkness. A deafening, unearthly shriek ripped through the manor, a sound that seemed to tear at the very foundations of the building, rattling their teeth and vibrating in their bones, a sound that would forever be etched into their minds, a haunting echo of profound agony and utter defeat, a dying curse that echoed with a chilling finality. The mist writhed, contorted into grotesque, impossible shapes, like a dying leviathan, then exploded outwards in a blinding flash of sickly green light and a burst of frigid, soul-numbing air, throwing them all against the scorched, crumbling walls with brutal force. The impact left them breathless, disoriented, aching, their bodies screaming in protest, every nerve ending aflame, their senses reeling. The lights flickered back on with a loud pop, revealing a room utterly ravaged, furniture overturned, walls scorched black, and the air thick with the smell of sulfur and ozone, the lingering stench of something truly evil, something that had nearly claimed them, leaving an indelible mark, a permanent stain on their souls. Silence. A profound, echoing silence settled over Blackwood Manor, broken only by their own ragged breathing and the distant creak of a settling timber, a final sigh from the wounded house, or perhaps, a lingering malevolent chuckle, a promise that it was not truly gone, merely waiting. Ben lay motionless on the floor, dazed but thankfully still breathing, a faint, sickly green glow still clinging to his arm, a mark of what had almost taken him, a permanent reminder of his brush with oblivion. Aris was instantly beside him, her hands shaking uncontrollably as she checked frantically for injuries, her scientific composure completely shattered, tears welling in her eyes as she murmured his name, a raw, desperate sound. "Ben. Ben. Talk to me. Are you hurt? Can you move?" Sarah was hunched against the far wall, clutching her crucifix to her chest, her body trembling uncontrollably, muttering prayers in a rapid, almost hysterical cadence. Her eyes, still wide with unholy terror, stared into the empty space where the entity had been, seeing horrors that Jake could only imagine. She didn't respond when Aris called her name, lost in her own personal hell. Jake, his body aching from 1,000 unseen blows, every muscle screaming in protest, pushed himself to his feet, every fiber of his being exhausted, but alive. He coughed, the scent of sulfur burning his throat, and looked at his trembling team. The iron stake lay on the floor, blackened and smoking, its sacred purpose fulfilled, its energy spent, a charred testament to their harrowing victory, or perhaps, a temporary reprieve. He picked it up, the residual heat a strange comfort. We did it," he rasped, the words feeling hollow, inadequate. "Everyone okay?" Aris looked up, her face streaked with dust and tears. "Ben's alive. I think his leg is broken. And Sarah? She's not responding. She's in shock." Her voice trembled, the sharp, logical tone replaced by a fragility Jake had rarely heard. The victory felt bitter, tinged with the heavy cost. The walk out of Blackwood Manor was a blur of exhaustion and adrenaline. They moved like wounded soldiers, supporting Ben between them, Sarah numbly shuffling along, her eyes still unfocused, her crucifix clutched tight. The rising sun, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and crimson, felt like a cold, alien light, offering little comfort after the darkness they had faced, a sun that couldn't truly banish the shadows within them. Once outside, the relief was almost incapacitating. They collapsed onto the dew-kissed grass, gasping for air, the fresh morning breeze feeling like a strange, foreign caress after the oppressive atmosphere of the manor. But even in the open air, the lingering cold remained, a phantom chill in their bones. Ben's leg was indeed broken, a clean snap that required immediate medical attention. Aris, ever the pragmatist, efficiently splintered it with equipment from their van, her hands still shaking. Sarah remained unresponsive, murmuring fragments of her Latin prayer, her eyes seeing things that weren't there, her mind trapped in the manor's torment. Jake knew the physical wounds would heal, but the psychological scars, especially for Sarah, would run far deeper. They had faced something truly malevolent, something that had tried to tear their minds apart, and in Sarah's case, had come terrifyingly close. As they waited for emergency services, Jake looked back at the imposing structure. It stood silent, seemingly inert, perhaps even peaceful in the emerging light, its windows like vacant eyes staring out at the world. A malevolent secret held within its decaying walls, waiting for its next victim, waiting to resume its ancient game. But he knew. Blackwood Manor had been wounded, but not truly defeated. And the chilling echo of that demonic shriek would forever haunt their dreams, a stark reminder of the night they danced with true evil. They had won the battle, but the war against the darkness was far from over. Their lives, irrevocably scarred, would never be the same. The silence from the manor wasn't peaceful, it was simply the silence of a predator digesting its meal, preparing for the next hunt. Blackwood Manor, outside Burlington, Iowa, wasn't just old, it was ancient by local standards, predating Iowa's statehood by decades. Built in 1838 by the reclusive and enigmatic Elijah Blackwood, a man who arrived in the burgeoning frontier town with immense wealth but no discernible past, the manor was an architectural anomaly. Its Gothic Revival style, complete with gargoyles and intricate, almost sinister, carvings, stood in stark contrast to the simpler, practical homesteads of the early settlers. Locals whispered that Blackwood chose the remote, wooded bluff overlooking the Mississippi not for its views, but for its isolation, its ancient, hidden ley lines, or perhaps, for something far darker. The true chilling chapter began a mere 10 years after its completion. In 1848, the entire Blackwood family, Elijah, his wife Eleanor, and their 2 young children, Thomas and Eliza, vanished without a trace. No bodies were found, no signs of struggle beyond overturned furniture in the master bedroom, eerily similar to the scene Jake's team had just left. The local sheriff, a stern but practical man, quickly dismissed it as a tragic Indian attack or a runaway, but the strange, suffocating dread that settled over the manor told a different story to those who dared to venture near. Livestock refused to graze near the property, and even the bravest hunters would give the woods a wide berth after sunset. Over the decades, Blackwood Manor passed through numerous hands, each owner meeting a grim fate. The Millers, a prosperous farming family who bought it in the 1870s, were found dead in their beds, their faces contorted in expressions of extreme terror, no discernible cause of death. The only unusual detail was the pervasive smell of ozone and sulfur that filled the house upon discovery. A young couple in the 1920s, seeking a secluded romantic getaway, were found several days later, both having succumbed to acute dehydration and starvation, despite ample food and water being readily available in the house, as if something had simply prevented them from leaving or finding sustenance. Each tragedy added to the manor's growing infamy, turning it from a local oddity into a regional legend of terror. The most disturbing incidents involved the missing. Over the last century, at least a dozen individuals, ranging from adventurous teenagers to curious paranormal enthusiasts, had entered Blackwood Manor and simply never emerged. Search parties found nothing, no trace, no struggle, just the chilling silence of the house and the lingering sense of being watched. One sheriff, after leading a search party in the 1970s, famously quit his job, claiming the house was not of this world and that he felt a cold hand reach into his soul. Paranormal investigators, lured by the challenge and the dark allure, began to seek out Blackwood in the late 20th century. Jake's team was the fourth, and until now, the only one to return. The first team in the 1990s, 3 seasoned ghost hunters, vanished completely. Their abandoned vehicle was found outside the gates, their equipment still inside, save for their main camcorder, which was never recovered. The second, a duo of university parapsychologists, left behind a single, garbled audio recording, punctuated by screams and an inhuman shriek that still sent chills down the spines of those who heard it. The third, a well-known television crew specializing in haunted locations, never even made it past the threshold. Their advanced scout, sent in to set up initial cameras, was found catatonic outside the gates, babbling about the shadows that eat light and the whispers of forever. He never recovered. Jake and Aris had studied these cases, meticulously poring over every detail. They knew Blackwood wasn't merely haunted by residual energies or lost souls. This was something ancient, something that fed on life force, on fear, on despair. Local folklore spoke of an old Native American burial ground disturbed during the manor's construction, and of Elijah Blackwood's alleged dabblings in forbidden rituals, seeking immortality or power from something beyond the veil. Some whispered that he had summoned something he couldn't control, and that his family's disappearance was merely the first, grisly payment. The common thread in all the accounts was the pervasive cold, the overwhelming sense of dread, the insidious whispers, and the distinct smell of ozone and decay that deepened into sulfur. And always, the feeling of being watched, not just by spirits, but by something far more intelligent, far more malevolent, something that enjoyed the hunt. Blackwood Manor wasn't a place where people died, it was a place where people were taken, where their essence was absorbed, adding to the power of the entity that resided within. And Jake's team had just come face to face with it, proving the legends were not just stories, but horrifying truths.